The next presentation is a panel discussion called Dairy Economics and the Future of U.S. Milk Marketing. I want to thank panel sponsor Compeer Financial of making this panel all possible. You want to make sure you come back for this. This will be a good one to pay attention to for sure. Now, please help me give a warm welcome to Greg Steele of Compeer Financial to the stage. Hi. Doing well, thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. As was mentioned, my name is Greg Steele. I'm a member of the Compeer Financial Dairy Lending Team. Compeer Financial is a proud sponsor of the 2018 Dairy Strong Conference, and also to be a sponsor of the distinguished panel of CEOs we're about to hear from. Dairy economics and the future of the U.S. dairy milk markets is no doubt, without question, the key to the future of our industry. Over the past year, we've seen the loss of BST, the erosion of basis, and to our dismay, the loss of milk markets to some of our producers. Having reliable markets that provide adequate financial returns to your dairy farms is in our collective best interest. I'm very anxious to hear the insights and perspectives of our panel of experts, what they have to say on this crucial topic for the Wisconsin and the U.S. dairy industry. Now it's going to be my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this panel. Mike North is the Mike North is the president of Commodity Risk Management Group, a firm devoted to assisting its clients in identifying and managing risk and opportunities in today's market. He grew up on a family dairy farm in southeastern Wisconsin and began his work with futures industry in 1995 as an intern with First Capital Ag. His agricultural experience, together with his understanding of commodity markets and his background in leadership, were foundational to the launch of Commodity Risk Management Group. Mike uses his experience to educate businessmen about the tools available for price protection and risk management. He has been published in several agricultural periodicals, is regularly featured in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the Dow Jones News, and is a regular guest on several national and local radio programs. It's my pleasure to welcome Mike North and our panelists here today. Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Greg, and for your sponsorship of this particular panel. Greg and his company have certainly been wonderful supporters of our organization, and Greg has devoted a great amount of his time as a board of director and been a wonderful friend. So thank you again, Greg. So I hope you had a chance to stretch and get things going. You know, he said I'm a part of a lot of different national programs. One of them I take great joy in is the Farm Journal TV programs. Betsy, of course, is one of their featured hosts and leads the charge on a lot of good news stories. And she also has a yoga show that you might find on the hours that follow, and I would appreciate her leading you in a little bit of stretching and getting moving around and keeping the blood flowing, because this is going to be an exciting topic. We're going to have a lot of fun this morning working through this. Greg pointed out that I've spent plenty of years in the markets and talking about the different tools available and talking about the risks that we face and the opportunities that are in front of us. And frankly, as we look at the marketplace, certainly there is a big opportunity in front of us with regard to trade. And there's been no shortage of chatter in recent months about where we sit in that. NAFTA is up for renegotiation. We're moving towards more of a bilateral trade structure and away from some of the multilateral conversations that we've been party to in the years. We're talking about the sensitivities of different relationships and how much volume moves out of our country. You know, today the estimate has grown. We've maybe eclipsed that 15% threshold. You look at product consumption in Mexico, and 73% of that being originated in the United States. You talk about the Class 7 pricing system in Canada and some of the ripple effects that it's had on our dairy economy here. You look at what's going on in parts of Asia and the different discussions that are taking place there, not just by us, but among our competitors. There is a lot to talk about here, and so we're going to do that. And so with us today, we have a really great panel of people, and I'm just going to walk you through who we have with us and give you the opportunity to welcome them as I introduce them. First, on my right, we have Michael Dykes. Michael's a longtime government affairs strategist, agricultural policy expert, and veterinarian. Michael Dykes became president and CEO of the International Dairy Foods Association in January 2017. IDFA represents more than 85% of the dairy foods produced and marketed in the U.S. Dykes has been a strong advocate for the importance of global competitiveness to the future of the U.S. dairy industry. He has made preserving trade partnerships with Mexico and improving Canadian market access for U.S. dairy exports a priority for IDFA. Dykes grew up on a small dairy and tobacco farm in Kentucky. Next, to his left, we have Chuck Connor. Chuck is the president and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives. Chuck Connor oversees NCFC's work to promote and protect the business and policy interests of America's farmer-owned cooperatives. Prior to joining NCFC, he served as the Deputy Secretary at USDA. Connor interacted directly with President George W. Bush and his senior staff to formulate domestic and international food, trade, security, and energy policy. He played a key role in developing the administration's immigration policy, including important changes to the H-2A program. Next, at the far left, my left that is, your right, we have Chad Vincent. Chad Vincent is the CEO of the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board, where he leads the efforts to build demand and awareness for Wisconsin's $45 billion dairy agricultural business. Chad has an extensive marketing and general management background, driving growth at companies ranging from Fortune 50 corporations to privately held family-owned ventures, including Miller Brewing Company, Heinz Frozen Foods, and Fiskars. Most recently, Chad spent 7 years in the artisan cheese category as the CMO, head of strategy at Sartori Cheese, where he led brand building efforts and the introduction of Sartori into retail and global markets. So with that, we're going to begin our panel. And as I come and join you guys, I'm going to start it out with a question to Chad. Chad, if you could tell us, how is Wisconsin working to position itself as a world leader in cheese and dairy products?
Well, in reality, it's a pretty easy job because we are. You know, we are. I mean, if you just took a look at cheese and cheese production, if Wisconsin was a country, we'd be the 4th largest cheese producing country in the world. And the infrastructure that we have in Wisconsin is unparalleled. I mean, I work with 17 other state and region CEOs that run their checkoff programs, and Wisconsin's the envy. There aren't that many places in the country or in the world where you have places like Center for Dairy Research, University of Wisconsin, DATCAP, the government, the processors, the farmers, all pulling in the same direction. It's not like that in most places. Wisconsin truly is a leader in dairy, but that said, we still have an incredible way to go. You know, from the Milk Marketing Board, just to step back a little bit, the checkoff program, I'm sure you all know, but it's 15 cents out of every 100 weight of milk produced. So 10 cents of that stays home with us, and 5 cents of that goes to an umbrella program managed by DMI out of Chicago. My overall role is to build trust in sales for our dairy farmers, and we take that very seriously. And I hope that, I could sit up here and talk for the full hour, but I can't because these guys have incredible insights that need to be shared as well. But we do have, we have world-leading and industry-leading programs that help drive demand and in trust and sales. We have 8 regional people across the country that do nothing but pair up with the top 200 grocery stores in the country and the cheese and dairy producers in the state to help that triangle of people drive more distribution and sales of Wisconsin product. Now, Wisconsin, roughly 90% of our cheese, of our milk goes into cheese, and 90% of that is sold outside of the state of Wisconsin. So the vast majority of our efforts are driving markets throughout the rest of the U.S. and internationally. And we have international experts here, and I'll let you guys talk on this, but international, with the growth projected coming out of Wisconsin and the country, if we don't jump on international and build international markets, we're never going to be able to supply, we're never going to utilize that demand. And our job is to make sure that the demand is going to be greater than what we can supply.
Thank you, Chad. So to build on what you were just saying, Chuck, Michael, if you could give us some insight into where some of these export discussions are, kind of paint a picture building on what Chad was just sharing with us, where that might be headed and maybe some of the significance that comes in these conversations.
You want me to go, Chuck?
Go ahead, Mike.
If we back up to the very beginning, I think we came out of this last election with a lot of people concerned about their own financial well-being. And if we think about what we've seen in some of the surveys, the one that I think the Pew Trust did, 48% of Americans would have to borrow money or sell something with an unexpected bill of $400 or more. It's pretty startling if you think about it. And we haven't had trade agreements for probably 25 years. NAFTA, for example, has been 25 years. And when we talk about trade agreements, we've been primarily talking about market access, which is stuff that we all like and you all like. But to the average person out here, market access doesn't have a whole lot of meaning when you're living in that kind of economic situation. So we got to change these trade discussions to jobs and wages and competitiveness so that people that are hurting can relate to that. We've gone through 8 years where we've had a GDP growth average of less than 2%. We've not had a 3% quarter. So we've gone through 8 years of pretty tough times, and during the last election, trade became the blame for everything. And if you think about the election, Trump was anti-trade, railing on trade. Bernie Sanders was railing on trade. So in politics, I always say that things aren't linear, they're circular. And when the far right goes far enough, it meets the far left that went far enough, and they become partners. So we had in this last election a case where the far left and the far right, if they're aligned on one thing, they're aligned on the fact that trade was horrible for everything, and any problems you had was to be blamed for trade. So if you take that context, and now Trump is president, he's carrying on with that. And he has many, many people in the base who still believe I'm hurting, and the reason I'm hurting is trade. So we got to change that discussion. He's also looking at these trade things from a trade balance. How much do I sell? How much do we sell to the country X, and how much does country X sell to us? And in a lot of these cases, and in most every sector of the economy, except agriculture, we have a positive balance of trade in agriculture. We sell more than we buy in agriculture writ large. So right off the bat in agriculture, we're coming at trade from a different perspective. And taking some of your comments, we all know that in agriculture, we'd be hurting if it weren't for trade. 1 row out of every 3 rows of soybeans are traded globally. 15% of our dairy is traded globally. 1 milking a week, that's the way I like to talk about it, is traded. If we look to the future, our production is going to exceed our consumption. In the next 10 years, we're going to need to be north of 20% of our dairy exported if you guys keep doing what you normally do, which is produce more milk. So inside the trade discussions, those are some of the things going on. That, I think, if you come back to that, it gives you a context as to why do you hear all this stuff about withdrawal? And what's the motivation for that? Well, there are a lot of people out there, even in rural America. Not all rural America is agriculture. There are a lot of other things in rural America other than agriculture, highly dependent upon agriculture, but not directly involved in agriculture. So there are a lot of people that are thinking, hey, yeah, trade's a bad thing. Trade's why I'm hurting so bad. And if we didn't have these trade agreements, my life would be much better, and I'd be back on track and so forth. So there's a lot of discussion about whether we withdraw or not, and we can get into more discussion about that and as we talk about this, Mike. But I think it's important to think about that context, and that's why agriculture is a little different than some of the other things. We're thinking about NAFTA. NAFTA is extremely important to U.S. agriculture. Our number one, number two markets in most of agriculture are Canada and Mexico. If we think about dairy, Canada, Mexico, Korea, and China account for about 50% of our total exports. All of those have been in the news. All of those have been discussions about withdrawing from the U.S.-Korea agreement, withdrawing from NAFTA. We're doing all kinds of discussions with China. So all that's in the backdrop. I don't know if that's what you wanted, but I just think before we get into the nuts and bolts of all this stuff, it's important to think about how do we get here and why would we have these kind of sentiments. And when I asked this question to audiences, I asked this in Michigan sometime in the last 2 months, how many in the audience thought withdrawing from NAFTA would be a good thing with an audience very similar to this one? I had several hands go up in the audience. So this isn't just an isolated feeling out here, and Trump isn't acting alone. He's having these comments reinforced.
Just to maybe build on that for a second, let's ask that question. So how
Well,
many?
I don't want to dictate your thing.
Well, no. So how many of you believe that a withdrawal from NAFTA would be a good idea?
I think they're afraid to raise their hands. Yeah, we're making progress.
We're making progress.
It's a good thing.
All right. So Chuck, if you could add to that.
Yeah.
Certainly your
Let
background
me
plays to
add a
this well.
finer point, Mike, to everything Michael has said, which I agree with, and that is clearly the political dynamics in the country have changed relative to trade. And as he stated, you couldn't be anti-trade enough in this last election, whether you were a voter for Mrs. Clinton or a voter for Donald Trump. You could not be, anti-trade enough in that campaign. And having been in a position in the past where I was responsible for getting the votes in Congress to pass old trade agreements, NAFTA being one of those, but there's been a lot of Central America, Korea, all these trade agreements. They have always passed the Congress by the narrowest of margins, the most recent one being a one-vote margin in the House of Representatives. Razor thin because of their controversy in the past. And typically in those votes, because of their ties to sort of labor and labor leaders, at best, you can maybe count on 1 out of 10 Democratic votes for a trade agreement. So, you're talking maybe 15 or 20 votes in the House among Democrats for any trade agreement. No matter, I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad agreement. I'm just talking about any trade agreement. If it's free trade agreement, you're limiting yourself in the past to 15 or 20. So that was okay because generally Republicans were for those bills, and that you could sort of coddle together enough to have a majority vote. Well, Trump, as seems to be the theme of everything we talk about, has changed that dynamic. And he was elected again very, very strongly in places like Pennsylvania and others on this kind of anti-trade platform. And so in the House of Representatives today, for example, among 20-some Republicans, 230, something like that.
232.
At best, if you just had a trade vote today, you might get half of them to vote. So you add that with 15 or 20 Democrats, and you're still 50 or 60 votes short of passing any trade agreements at all. And again, I'm not saying anything on whether they're a good agreement or bad. I'm just saying anything that says trade agreement. So it's a different world. Now that's the negative, and I'll quickly touch on what I think is a very positive thing that is going on out there just in terms of on-the-ground exports. We have a new position at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it's called the Undersecretary for Trade. And this was an act by Congress where they felt like trade was not getting the attention that it needed within USDA because it was sort of under an umbrella group that was not only responsible for trade, but all farm programs, dairy programs, crop insurance. This person sort of had jurisdiction over all of that, and that is no longer the case today. We have sort of a second in command at USDA whose sole responsibility is to promote exports on behalf of U.S. farmers. And I know this guy well. Michael does well. His name is Ted McKinney. he is a fired up guy when it comes to doing this job, and he's especially fired up when it comes to promoting dairy products. And as many of us know, Chad, you know this as well, when you're talking about international markets, oftentimes it's sort of private to government sort of sales relationships in these international markets. And these people like Ted McKinney can open those doors to get us in there to, you know, to show our wares, if you will. And he's doing some of that now, but you're going to see a lot more of that. And I think the dairy industry has a tremendous opportunity to work with Ted to get some of those doors open.
And I would add, he is working for the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, which is the most positive, supportive trade advocate we have for agriculture. Far above our U.S. Trade Ambassador, who does not come from a history of agriculture. So all of us in this sector owe a great deal of gratitude already to Secretary Perdue for what he's done for agriculture trade. First and foremost, within 48 hours of being in the office, he persuaded President Trump not to withdraw from NAFTA. That executive order was already written. Secretary Perdue did that. And he's continued to be out beating the drum about the positive aspects of agricultural trade. So we have none any better.
So I guess I maybe want to go there for a minute. The reality is that, and we heard Anna talking this morning about some of the craziness in Washington politics right now, but as we do look inside of the Trump administration and the influence that Sonny has, or the ear that he's been able to get from the president on trade, what does it look like inside of the Trump administration as far as where we do sit with trade? I know you hear a lot of tweets and you hear a lot of, you know, news stories, but, you know, from your view, what are you seeing in Washington to that end?
Well, Mike, as you know, I worked inside the White House in the Bush administration, so I've seen how presidents operate, you know, kind of up close and personal. And it is true, this is obviously a very, very different White House. When I served President Bush did not see anything that had not gone through a process of you know, sort of fact-checking. And that served President Bush well because, you know, his point of view as the President of the United States, for a lot of different reasons, should, you know, not saying they should never pick the wrong policy, but their facts ought to be true. And in this new White House, you know, that is, they have a much more free flow of information. I don't think, as Anna noted this morning, I don't think anybody can walk into the Oval Office now and, you know, throw something in front of the president like they did in the early days. But it's still, by historical standards, a very, very loosely run operation, and that's the way the president wants it. In this case, you know, there's good and bad with that. Had it been tightly controlled, as Michael mentioned, Sonny Perdue may not have ever had that opportunity to walk into the Oval Office and save our bacon relative to NAFTA. And because of that freedom, he did. He was sort of the last guy in there, and I think you know, early on that was a decision the president was probably prepared to make. Let's just withdraw from NAFTA, throw it on the dust heap, and start from scratch. That is not where we are today, and that's the good news to the equation. Is I think agriculture has had a tremendous influence, certainly on the secretary, but on the president as well, and all indications are that you know, the president is never going to stand up and say NAFTA was the great trade agreement, but I think his expectations for change have been altered dramatically, and that's to the benefit of agriculture.
I would add to that, as you watch each of the administrations come and go, they all function differently. I would say during the Clinton administration, they were very open, and very much reaching out to folks wanting to get input. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? During the Republican administrations, they tend to be much closer and a little closer hold on things. The irony that I find about this administration is you have a Republican administration, you have a Republican Senate, you have a Republican House. You get calls from inside this administration saying you got to help us because we may be withdrawing from NAFTA, or we may be withdrawing from course on Labor Day weekend. Oh, what do you want me to do about that? Well, we need you to get calls in There's no need to call in Purdue, because Purdue's with us. He's already weighed in. You only need to have governors call 2 people. They need to call Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, and Donald Trump personally. So this is Saturday morning, and you're supposed to do this sometime Saturday, Sunday, or Labor Day, Monday. So we have some very dedicated people inside this administration who work every day to try to advance and are caught reaching out for help on some of these problematic types of issues. So there's some great folks, and there are dedicated people out there advancing agriculture every day inside this administration. So no matter what you hear or what you think, there are some people that are really, truly dedicated to trying to make a difference. And we've had some positive changes. Think about on the regulatory side, think about economic growth. 3% is not unheard of anymore, 3% GDP growth. We've gone from a 19,000 Dow in November of 2016 to, I don't know how many of you were looking yesterday. I know no one in this group was looking because you're all busy with the conferences. But we surpassed 26,000 yesterday. Closed above 26,000 yesterday. So there's some positive things happening that sometimes go unnoticed with all the other noise that's going on.
Well, thank you. So as we talk about this concept of trade more broadly and its importance and what's going on policy-wise, I guess I want to circle back around to some of the boots on the ground discussion, if you will. Chad, you had mentioned earlier, and we're all intimately aware of this, that there are dollars that are collected.
Right.
And those dollars come to WMB and then some off to DMI. Can you speak to where those 2 organizations, yours and DMI, are at in terms of how those checkoff dollars are being allocated and what's being done to, put that money to work? And if you could speak to that, that would be great.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the ability to sit up here with folks from DBA, and because from the checkoff perspective, by federal law, we can't lobby, right? So we can't engage in the activity. And thank God we have you guys here to be able to pull the weight when the weight needs to get pulled. So yeah, we are more boots on the ground. We are more promotion and more sales and trust driven. We've forged a very strong relationship with DMI and the national group, which is vital because they craft programs that can cover, that umbrella cover all 50 states. And so the efficiencies of spending the farmers' nickels, we watch that. We watch it very, very closely. So by having programs that can run at a national basis that we can then execute locally, all 17 states and regions don't necessarily have to go and produce everything. So we're very tightly allied with our friends at DMI. And some of the programs that we work on jointly are, on the sales side are quite amazing. We've inserted scientists into McDonald's. So, why would we do that? Well, all of a sudden we have people that understand the technical mechanics of dairy and how cheese melts on burgers and how butter works, and so now all of a sudden McDonald's magically flips from margarine to butter, right? And that's hundreds of millions of pounds of milk utilized a day, per year, that wasn't utilized before. And the reason that they pick McDonald's out of all the other people that we could be working with is when McDonald's changes, everybody else follows. So Burger King, all the rest of these guys now flip over from margarine to butter. And so and I think we've seen the impact that has on the milk check. We've done the same thing with players like Domino's, where we sent scientists in, help them understand what's going on with consumers and how cheese works. And all of a sudden they add an ounce or 2 to every pizza. And you're like, well, how big a deal is that? Well, that's hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds a year. And once again, that's not only helping Wisconsin, that's helping, there's a vast array of people that are in that ecosystem. Locally, we partner with Culver's. And you look at the way that they portray dairy farmers and the work that we do, and it's magical, right? And we have a voice with them. They're on the road pushing this stuff very hard, but I think with us working with them, they really clearly understand the power and the positivity that they have of the image and building trust in our dairy farmers, because that's the other side of this equation, right? We have we're out there with all, day in and day out pushing to drive sales and distribution, and we have more programs than I could talk about in 2 hours. But building trust is the other side of this equation, right? So we have some world-class research, because we want to tell the farmers, we have stories that we want to tell, right? We want to talk about our new technology. We want them to understand us so that the anti-groups will stop picking on us and stop making our lives miserable. You know what? The antis aren't going to stop. And the folks that have their agenda against us play by very different rules than we do. So when I've been in this job for a year, and we spent a lot of time reacting. And in reality, we're chasing a false promise here. What we have to do is get out in front of this and start talking about telling the farmer stories. There's nobody in the land that is more trusted than dairy farmers. None. Farmers overall. I mean, 60, 75% trust approval. Now we have, unfortunately, folks in government that are down in the single digits, right? People put farmers and dairy farmers on a pedestal. They love what you do. They love the fact that you drive. You create food for the world, so they don't have to. They can go do other things. They can pursue other things. Without us, and there's no hope. They love farmers, but the concern that they have is the transparency of farming. And that's where the heartache comes. So for me, it's all about building the trust, of utilizing the farmers to build that trust and get those stories out. So when they hear those stories that can't be true, they give us the benefit of the doubt and they don't run down that path. It's a long battle, but it's one that, with the help of people at DMI, world-class researchers that understand how we can communicate these messages so that consumers will be at the right time and in the right method to accept it. And I think we might hit on transparency later on this, but I know it's hard, right? I know that, the farm program is hard, and I know that, tail docking and all these elements that come up and they just seem to come out of nowhere and hit us are difficult. But either we can get out in front and tell these stories, or we can abdicate it and let somebody else. And I can tell you, nobody else is going to tell the stories the way they need to be told other than we will. So the checkoff program is, I meet farmers every day, and they're like, where's my money going? I mean, really? I don't see it, right? Well, we're not advertising that much in the state anymore, right? I'm trying to invest that money to drive stronger and better returns. But imagine the day that the checkoff went away and that all of a sudden USDEC, or U.S. Dairy Export Council, goes away. I mean, with Tom Vilsack at the lead, former Secretary of Agriculture, leading our efforts to build dairy markets outside the country, imagine that going away. He's going to open doors that nobody else in this industry has ever opened before, and we're going to, as Wisconsin, I'm going to make sure we're not left behind. We're going to be stepping right through those doors. There's the building the trust, there's driving the sales, there's the dominoes, there's all these big things, but then there's the things that the farmers find near and dear to their hearts about going into schools, right? So there's a program that DMI pioneered called Fuel Up to Play 60, partnered with the NFL. In the last few years, we've reached 3 million Wisconsin school kids on the power of dairy, right? So influencing the next wave, the next generation of our consumers. What we do is really important. What we do is really difficult to communicate to farmers because you guys are really busy. You're not hanging out on social media. And when we send mails, typically mailing ends up on the kitchen table. And after it gets this high, it gets swept off. So we had a booth. In fact, we had a booth out here, right? And we're trying to get people. We're trying to get the farmers to have the communication, have the talk, and we have a wonderful relationship with local press. And we're on TV every day telling our story. But please, if you have questions or you have people that have questions, have them come talk to us because what we do is really, really important.
Thank you, Chad. And certainly as we talk about our growing relationship, we've certainly been appreciative of your willingness to take this to the next level. We talk about the things that are happening at home and your work with Culver's. There were some comments here a number of years ago that kind of drew the line as to what a dairy farm should be. And frankly, we very quickly responded and said, hey, look, we all need to come to the table. We all need to be talking about where dairy is and not trying to paint this old picture of what a dairy was and promote that in our product. And how many of you have seen the new Culver's commercials with Craig Culver standing in a freestall barn? These are all subtle things. These are all things that we do to send our message and to be able to communicate to our consumer, and it's a vital piece. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing in that regard, even if it's sometimes subtle and goes unnoticed. We do appreciate that. I want to kind of open it up to you other gentlemen to talk about within your own organizations what you're doing to the same end, and give you a chance to speak to that. I know we're going to be at a major event that your group is going to be hosting this next weekend and week, and I'll be happy to join you there and look to hear some of these more things. But if you could share with our membership kind of where IDFA is at in this same pursuit.
I'll do so. Thank you. Dairy Forum 2018, Palm Desert, California, starting Saturday. For those of you who aren't registered, please register. Iguanas will not be falling out of the tree, hitting you in the head. The lakes will not be frozen. It'll be about 70 degrees, so maybe that'll be enough to whet your appetite. That's the place to be. We'll have Congressman Bob Goodlatte there, who is going to become, in my view, a central figure in the whole immigration piece coming up here soon. DACA, H-2C worker, borders, walls, chain migration, visa lottery, all of those things. He'll be there speaking. He kicks us off on Sunday night with the keynote address. And we have our trade panel, we have other things, but we have beautiful weather. So for no other reason, come take a respite and get out of the cold and enjoy Southern California. What am I doing? I've been at IDFA for a year. I started with the people, and I did an interview with every person that works there and asked, why do you work here? What's working well? What can we improve? We've made some changes in people. We're still looking at how we organize, but I see us with three big functions. One is advocacy. We have as our primary role to advocate on behalf of the dairy industry. We have no checkoff dollars. We have no USDA dollars. We're totally membership, and we're advocating. Second piece is regulatory policy. I've made some changes in the regulatory group. We'll probably add some more depth there. We have a stellar group that has many years of experience. And then the third piece is communications, and we will add some heft to our communications efforts as well, because I'm a believer we need to be in the story. And to your point, if we're not telling the story for dairy, others will be telling the story for dairy. So I am trying to tell the story. I've started being on Twitter. For those of you who aren't on Twitter, I know you think that's a foreign concept, but I can tell you how to make the news easy. When you first get up in the morning, look at your Twitter, see what Donald Trump has tweeted, and you don't need to watch the rest of the day, because Ana Navarro and CNN and MSNBC and Fox, they'll all be talking about what Trump tweeted early that morning. So you won't have missed a thing. You'll be caught up. It takes you 5-10 minutes. It's easy to do. We're out there. We're trying to be in the news. We're doing, if we get asked for an interview, we've been interviewed by the Washington Post. We've been interviewed by the New York Times. We've had some of our members with op-eds in the Wall Street Journal on trade. We're out there. We are working. Another thing that I've stressed with my team is collaboration. I'm a firm believer that we will be stronger when we work together. And most of our issues in dairy between producer and processor, 90% of those we have a shared interest in. And if we can focus our energy and our efforts on those places where we have a shared interest, we'll be far more productive and effective in working on behalf of this entire industry. And I don't think there's a better example of that than what we did this past year. And many of our processors wanted some way for price risk management on Class 1 milk. We've been able to hedge Class 3 and 4, 2, 3, and 4, but we could never do anything with Class 1 because we had to hire of. Sitting down with 6 people from IDFA and 6 people from National Milk Producers Federation, and I said I didn't want any of the CEOs there because I didn't want them going in and just stating positions. I wanted people who knew what they were talking about, sitting across the table with each other. I think we've got a compromise, and for the first time ever, we've gone to Capitol Hill, National Milk, IDFA, Dykes, Mulhern, and our teams, and we presented a joint proposal on the Farm Bill with 3 priorities. One is we make some changes. We support risk management tools for both producers and processors, meaning we need to make some changes in margin protection. We need to lift the cap on livestock gross margin. We need to make it available to hedge Class 1 milk, which I think will help both producers and processors. We need to, another thing we've come with is we need to work on the demand side of this equation, because I go back to where I started. You guys have a phenomenal capacity to produce, and you're continuing to produce milk. We got to have increased demand for milk. So one of the proposals we put forward is an incentive inside the SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, formerly known as the old food stamp program. So that if you buy dairy products, most likely fluid milk of some sort, you'll get an incentive to buy more. There's been some stuff done on that similarly with fruits and vegetables. We're trying to get in with dairy and with milk. So those are our three things we've gone to the Hill together with. And I'm trying to get a culture of member services inside IDFA. And I come from a veterinary practice. So when the phone rang, that was a business, that was a client, that was someone we needed to service. I'm trying to implement the same type of culture and the same type of mentality inside IDFA. When the phone rings, that's a member that has a need, and we need to provide a service. So those are some of the kinds of things I'm doing. One of the other things we've done is, as we talk about this trade issue, and we got to relate it to jobs and economic impact, we have done a thing called Dairy Delivers. It's a tool we have developed that is on their website, idfa.org. It's open to the public. Anyone can go do it. We're branding and trying to trademark the name Dairy Delivers. But you can pull up for the U.S., total jobs economic impact. You can do it for any state. You can do it for any congressional district. And all total in the dairy industry, we're nearly 3 million jobs, and we're about $600 billion economic impact. That's significant when you go talk to your state officials or your members of Congress or your U.S. senators or governors. We took that one step further. We worked with 21 other food and ag organizations, and we combined our data, and we did it under a thing called Feeding the Economy, and that too is available on the website. When we combine what we do in food and agriculture, we're a little over 43 million jobs and a nearly $7 trillion economic impact. Food and agriculture is the largest sector of the U.S. manufacturing jobs. When we have those kinds of tools, we can have an impact. And you can all have those kinds of tools because they're publicly available. I insist that we make it publicly available through IDFA. So go to idfa.org and you can get these for dairy. So that gives you a little bit about what we're trying to do. But I could talk for the rest of the day, but that's probably enough for right now. And if you come to Dairy Forum, I'll bore you even more with the other things we're doing.
All right, great. Well, Chuck, I want to give you a chance to speak to this same thing and how your organization is working to, grow the footprint of dairy inside our country and out.
All right. Mike, NCFC is in a very unique position to be that advocate, not only for the dairy industry, but I think one of the strengths that we bring to the table as well is that for cooperatives, I like to say oftentimes we represent sort of everything from blue jeans to blueberries and everything in between, and that is true. There are farmer-owned co-ops out there manufacturing blue jeans. We've got milk is a big equation. We've got the input side, the fertilizer dealers. We've got grain. We've got all the specialty crops, the credit, farm credit system. These give us a very unique and diverse voice. And Chad mentioned something earlier that is very, very significant. He said, farmers have a lot of street cred out there, and they do. They particularly have a lot of street cred in Washington among elected representatives. I know some of you don't believe that, but I guess we don't have time to sort of give the full explanation, but I'll just say I've been doing this for 37 years, and farmers have tremendous street credibility in Washington, D.C. among elected representatives when we are speaking with the same voice. Now, when we're fighting among each other, and Michael mentioned a little bit of this out, when in the old days when it was the dairy farmer versus the manufacturer, then everything I just said goes out the window. But I will close, this part, Mike, with this statement. When farmers are speaking with one voice, I've never seen us lose in Washington, D.C. on any issue. Never in my 37 years. And so as an organization, our goal, given the diversity of what we represent out there, it's always to sort of pull our farmer owners together to speak with that unified voice so that we don't get beat. And we've been pretty successful at that. We're successful on GMO labeling. We were successful in the tax bill on this. I think we're going to be successful eventually on labor issues. But the reason we're even in the ballgame is because we're speaking with one voice.
I want to make one other comment on membership, if I could, which I think is important. When I came into IDFA, I got to tell you, I was surprised at the diversity of membership. I assumed that the major retailers made nothing and someone else made everything for them and they put it on a shelf and sold it. Mm-hmm. Little did I know, much to my surprise, Kroger, H-E-B, Publix, Albertsons Safeway, Walmart now, Quick Trip in Wisconsin are all members of IDFA. Why? They take in raw milk, pasteurize it, and make their dairy case. And many of them also make most of the baked goods that are there, and even the hot prepared foods that are there. So Dykes is always learning, because I'm a little slower, but I'm continuing to learn. So at IDFA, we represent co-ops, because so many of the dairy co-ops also process milk. We represent most anyone that makes ice cream. We represent most anyone that makes cheese. We represent anyone that bottles fluid milk. We represent the retailers, as I just mentioned. We represent the folks who make infant formula. So one of my thoughts has been, we should be able to leverage that diversity of membership for the benefit of the whole. And I don't think it's a better example is when I came with the idea of let's try to get into the SNAP program. So much of the time when we in agriculture go into SNAP, we have no credibility because we don't know how SNAP works. And SNAP's complicated and it's way above your head, Dykes, so you can't do anything with it. Well, we go into a SNAP discussion and we have Kroger and H-E-B and Publix and Albertsons with us. We can talk about how SNAP works because those are the guys that are doing the transactions. And so when we talk about a program and how we could develop a program and how could it possibly work, we have people on our team that know how to do it and how to talk about it and so forth. So I'm trying to leverage, Mike, the diversity of our membership for the benefit of the whole.
So I like where you're going with this, all right? So we're moving towards the consumer. And ultimately, that's where we want to end up, right? That's where we want to move product and more of it. And so as we talk about the consumer and, whether it be through SNAP or just, the mother or father walking the grocery aisle, there's been some breakdown, I think, over the last couple of years with regard to confidence in our product. There's certainly been a lot of confusion over labeling. There's been confusion over, what is good and what is not. And, and certainly there's a lot of issues that stem from that. Can you talk to, among the three of you, and I'll just open it up, what we're doing to not only build the confidence in the product, but to clear the noise and, send the message that, that dairy belongs in the grocery cart?
Right. Sure. I mean, to me, the issue of consumer confidence is paramount to our success. And it's interesting because I think there's a dichotomy between what farmers think they need and what consumers want. And we're trying to draw that thread throughout the entire process there. And when I talk to farmers about this, I said, "Are you a consumer?" Well, yeah. How many of us, the trend of people want to know where their food comes from, right? And they want to know that their food is safe, and they want to know that their food is nutritious. And as a dairy industry, we deliver on that in spades. There's nobody out there that delivers on that better than we do. So on the food, but you're talking to consumers that are being bombarded on social media, and they're confused about who do I listen to. We have great scientists that are out there that can give the scientific explanation as to why nutrition and all the, but there you have to find these links between people that can take what the scientists are saying and translate it to the great middle, the 40 or 50% of people that are so confused about diet and food and safety. And so we're working very closely with world-class communicators and researchers to try and tie this whole communication ecosystem together to get that word out to the 40 or 50% of the people that can be swayed. Now, I go back to there's the group of antis out there, and they're yelling loud, but as a lot of the research that we're seeing is, we can't always try and react to that, because that's what the more we react, the louder the din, the louder the yell, and the bigger the issue comes. So it's hard, but let them scream at each other off in the corner. We need to be able to get out there and tell our stories, utilizing the farmers as the spokesperson, and be able to tell the consumers the incredible, powerful stories that we have. Conversely, we also need to open the kimono and say, look, come on the farms. Look what we're doing. Look at, if you're concerned about the way animals are treated, come and see us at a farm. Because I tell you, whenever, one of the biggest programs we have is we're bringing tours of high influence magazine writers and TV professionals onto farms. And most of them walk onto the farm with a negative attitude and with a biased agenda. And for the vast majority, when they walk out of that, away from that farm, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. I had no idea what you dealt with. I had no idea with how you treat the animals and how you treat the land. And because all they hear is they hear the screaming, and they hear the people that don't play fair in terms of their communication. So it's incumbent upon us and you to step out and tell the stories. I know you're all tired, but at the end of the night, if you can learn how to Twitter, you can learn how to play on Twitter, you can learn how to play on Facebook for a few minutes, spread the word and talk to people that aren't farmers. Because we do a great job of talking to each other. We got to talk to everybody. So please, if you can, we have the most powerful and positive stories to tell, and it's incumbent upon us to tell them.
Yeah, and that's so true. As an organization, you watched last night as we gave away our advocacy award, and certainly to a deserving recipient. But I loved her comments. She didn't feel that she did anything different than what the rest of us do. And I want to drive home the point that it's so important that all of us have a circle of influence. All of us have people that, from this side of the room to that side of the room, they may not know each other. And so it's incumbent on each of us to make sure that we're continuing to deliver the message. It's vital that as members, not just as a board of directors, not just as a DBA staff, but as members, we take it upon ourselves to carry that message forward. Because in your circle of influence, I carry very little. They carry very little, but you carry a lot. And it's vital that they hear it from you. And so I can't stress that enough as we talk about this subject of consumer confidence and being transparent and open to our neighbors and the conversations that stem at the grocery store and in our circles of influence and at the PTA meetings and at church and wherever it happens. But I really appreciate that point. So let's take that a step further. From your levels, from where you're sitting, what do you guys see in this regard? And where do we go forward with that inside of your organizations? And
I take it one step further. It's the people, it's the animals. How are we caring for the animals? How are we caring for the environment? And I would add a third one to that. How are we caring for the people that are working on the farm?
Yeah, absolutely.
That one is an emerging one, and it's one we need to get our arms around. People care about that. They want to know about that. And the perception is it's not good. So, and I don't think that's true. It's not true from the farms I've been on. It's like, why would you not take care of your animals? That's your livelihood. Why would you not take care of your workers? It's your livelihood. But the perception is that's not what's happening. So I would just say, get ready, that's coming. I oftentimes get the question, when is this craziness ever going to end? We're going to get back to normal. This craziness is never going to end. It's an evolving situation. Consumers change what they want. I remember when I was in veterinary practice, you couldn't give butter away. If no one was eating butter, it's going to kill us all. Now butter is healthy again, and thank God for butter. And now the question is, when will the butter bubble burst? So things are coming back. I think, why do people like butter now? I think there's two reasons. We often hear in dairy circles there's only one reason, and that's because the science is there and people's heard the science. I spent 26 years at Monsanto. Science is required, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient to carry the day. I believe one of the big reasons why people are going back to butter, it's a very clean, natural label. Now they know where it comes from, they know what it takes to make it, and it's not a bunch of unknown names for which they've never heard of that they find in margarine. I think that's a big piece along with the science. So we're in a culture of choice. If we look at the beverage case today, in the 70s we had milk, juice, coffee, moonshine if you were in Kentucky. There weren't too many choices. And heaven help us, when I was a kid, if you ever thought about you'd ever one day sell water. Water's our biggest competitor, guys. We sell more water than we do milk. And if you to the sporting events, it doesn't matter whether you buy a soda or you buy water, it's the same price. So we're in a competitive landscape when it comes to milk. Our fluid milk consumption has been going down. We were about 30 gallons a person in the 70s. We're about 18 gallons a person today. Now we're drinking milk in other forms. We're drinking it in yogurt. We're drinking it in cheese on pizza. Thank God for stuffed crust pizza. Stuff in the crust, double the cheese on a pizza. Like that. So we've got work to do. We've got to compete with the consumer. I always say the consumer wants to be heard. They want to be engaged. They want values. They want food with a story. It's more than just eating to get full. They want food with a story. So it's going to be an evolving thing. It's going to change. We're going to have to keep on top of it. We're seeing cultural influences on the consumer side now. Look at all the habanero types of flavors. Look at all the pepper jack you see, all these different things. Those kinds of things change. We're seeing, we thought organic had no end to it. We thought organic was going to be everywhere and keep climbing, climbing, climbing. Well, maybe that's not the case. So those things are going to change and evolve, but we got to always keep our finger on the pulse of the consumer, because they've got a lot of choice on what they buy. And it's going to take innovative packaging. It's going to take innovative distribution, new products. Think about how many people sit around their kitchen table in the morning and eat a bowl of cereal and pour milk over it. Nothing like they used to. They're eating it while they're sitting at a stoplight in a car. It's grab and go. That doesn't lend itself to a bowl of cereal and a glass of milk. So it's either yogurt out of a squeezable thing, or a yogurt flip, or something along those kinds of lines. So we just got to be innovative and think about those kinds of things. But to sell the same old white commodity in the same old plastic jug with a different color lid, and then wonder why we have problems, we got to think about those. We need to keep doing that, but we got to think about new and innovative types of things.
Chuck, is there anything you'd like
Well,
to add?
Mike, I do think we're doing a better job than we used to on this interfacing with consumers.
Yes.
We were really bad at this for too long, but I think we've come a long way in terms of catching up. We're not there, but we've come a long way. I think one of the key things we have realized, again, from a consumer's perspective, and we keep going back to this, but our research among consumers says that there is a very, very high level of trust among farmers. They may not trust companies, but they still have a very high level of trust among farmers, you know, again, with the exception, as Chad noted. I mean, there's some outliers out there that are racing to the bottom that, you know, we put them in a totally different category, but in general, farmers have that credibility, and when the consumers see what's going on, I think that they have, you know, responded far better than where we were a decade ago on this very question. And
we're in an environment, in a political environment, a national environment where there isn't much trust of anybody. Right? There's a lot more infighting and a lot more vitriol than there is. But you know what? As dairy, we're pure, we're wonderful. We have incredible stories, and people are waiting to hear those stories to adopt what we have to say.
You know, one of the I reflected on the presentation last night, which I thought was very interesting. I don't know about the rest of you. I thought you did a phenomenal job. But one of the things that struck me last night, as I relate that to consumers today, I was talking to Don Niles earlier this morning. Being a boomer, we grew up with our parents being traditionalists who thought we were crazy when we left one job, went to another. When I left veterinary practice, my parents thought I'd absolutely lost my mind. They've thought that several times before then too, and they've thought that several times since then. But they thought I absolutely lost my mind. Why would you do all that and then Go be a lobbyist, for Christ's sakes. So as we think then about the generations coming on, they've seen corruption everywhere they looked, and nothing was as it seemed to be. Whereas in our time, you worked for a company, you stayed there for 35, 40 years, you never spoke bad about them, you took care of them because they took care of you. We've got a generation out there where there's really nothing sacrosanct, because no matter what you thought was rock solid turns out to be corrupt as all get out. So I take that back to where are we with consumers, or sometimes I think about what is one bad news story or two bad news stories, why does it cause so much trouble? Because it's an isolated event. Well, in my mindset, it's an isolated event, but if I come at these kinds of things skeptical, which most of my experience base has been skepticism that's been further proven out that I was right to be skeptical, we have one or two bad events. It confirms for these folks that, hey, all these guys are bad just like I thought. So I learned something. Again, I try to learn something every day, which is easy for me, but I come back to Madison. I used to live here. I lived here for 3 years. It's good to be back, but I came back and I listened last night. I thought, no wonder a few isolated events have such a significant impact, because we have a generation of people who are kind of suspecting it not to be the way they've been told it is, and lo and behold, here it is in video, and it's just exactly what I thought.
Us Gen Xers.
Yeah, always problems. We'll probably never quit working, so give up.
Yeah. So I want to build on my comments from just a moment ago. All right. So as you look at this panel, we're WMMB, we're NCFC, we're IDFA, we're DBA, and in the room we have some representatives with us this morning. And I will tell you that oftentimes we're just alphabet soup, right? But as an organization, I will tell you that some of the greatest value is for our members to join us in the conversation. And so as you talk to your representatives, again, there too, share your story. So we're going to close the conversation and open it up for a couple of questions. We have a short amount of time, and want to open it up for you to inquire of these fine gentlemen anything that's on your mind.
We all know that the processing capacity in the upper Midwest and Northeast is really tight. What can we do to improve that short-term, long-term, so that our producers have a place to ship milk?
Chad question.
You want to take that, Chad?
Go ahead.
It's a question we get a lot. I've learned another thing since I've been here. Wisconsin really likes taking Michigan milk. I've heard that from several of you. We hear that a lot about the processing capacity, and we need more cheese processing capacity in the upper Midwest. And your milk production is increasing. You're doing a phenomenal job producing milk. We have a lot of processing capacity in California. Production's declining in California. Price of land, environmental regulations, opportunity to make money with other crops, all those, a whole plethora of reasons. So I think we have to look at that thing as I back up and look at that from an economic perspective. Anytime you're going to allocate capital, you got to think about what's the return and where can I allocate, what are my other choices to allocate capital to? Do I want to do it in a cheese plant, or I want to do it in building a greenhouse to grow cannabis in for the growing market of cannabis, for example? So I think that's going to take some additional conversations. I believe if the money's there and the return is there, we'll probably see maybe more of the co-ops move more into processing as well as another way to add value. So instead of just taking your milk and marking your milk and then giving you a refund back on what they've been able to make by collective bargaining with pooling the milk, they may also take your milk, turn it into some other value-added product, and then send that return back to you in that manner as well. So I think it'll balance itself out. I think that's going to take some time. We may also have to look at some of the other reforms around the way milk is priced and those kinds of things, if that becomes necessary. We've not looked at make allowance in a long, long time in terms of the federal orders. And again, I'm not here, don't hear me here saying I'm trying to go destroy the federal orders. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the economic questions will be drivers of these kinds of things that will influence where capital goes to address those kinds of things. But clearly, we're getting in a situation that if we look at our states regionally, where our milk is and where our processing is that's not in sync.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, and close to home. I mean, this afternoon we're meeting with 20 to 35 of Wisconsin cheese companies to have that conversation. Here's where we are. Here's where we're going. What's holding you back from growing? How do we help?
Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll take one last question and then turn it back to Betsy.
How important is traceability to the local consumer, to the domestic consumer, and to the world consumer? Do the ability to know where the food comes from, how important is that, and especially to the export trade?
I think, I've said for a long time, these supply chains are going to get shorter. And I think as you look at the larger consumer packaged good food companies, they're looking for growth. And growth in the old line products is not there. It's more in the niche products. And that's why they're buying startups. But they're also going to want to market, where does the food come from? So they're going to want to be closer to that producer and maybe even have a picture of the family on the package and highlight what's being done on that farm for corporate social responsibility. It is sustainability. What are you doing for the environment? What are you doing for the animals? And what are you doing for the people? So I think they're going to want to try to put more value, a more values-based marketing into their packages. So I think we're going to see it. I think another thing that's going to drive that is food safety. Mm-hmm. If we think about listeria and salmonella, but we can now, through whole genome sequencing, it isn't just that you had salmonella. We know which salmonella or which listeria you had, and I had. So when that shows up, we know you had it a year ago. And then the whole blockchain on traceability. So I think traceability will continue to increase. It'll continue to be demanded, and it'll become an even more important piece of food safety.
It's the reality today. If you can't trace where your ingredients came from, if heaven forbid there's a recall, if you can't get that information to Kroger or Meijer or Walmart within an hour, you know, in places that I've been, we've run tests and we can trace the milk load back on a recall in 30 minutes. Yep. If you can't do that, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. Food safety is critical. I mean, the big players won't take you if you can't prove if you're not at the top of the food safety chain. And once again, that's a power of the U.S. economy, and what we have that, and that's why cheese is such a big, and dairy is such a big opportunity for us in China, places like China around the world. China trusts the U.S. food system a lot more than they trust their own, right? So once again, I think we're sitting on a precipice of a gold mine. It's just a matter of making sure that we execute, and we have people that open the doors properly, and that we have people in the room, and the cheese companies and the dairy companies that are willing to step up, because, you know, I don't make a product. I only help people in the room sell their products. And you can lead a horse to water, but so we need people that want to start drinking.
Wonderful.
We have the productive capacity, we have an unmatched safety record, and we have unparalleled distribution channels. We are poised to compete with anyone in the marketplace, global marketplace, if we have a level playing field.
Wonderful. Well, I wish we had time for more questions, but in the sake of keeping with our program, I'd ask that you all join me in thanking these gentlemen for contributing to our program. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, good to have you.
Thank you, Chuck. All right, Betsy, all yours.
Thank you, thank you. How about that round table, everyone? Let's give them another round of applause. Good information there. Good information there. Now, I want to let you all know that the staff of Dairy Strong will send out a survey via email here coming up probably in the next week or so, and they're encouraging you to fill it out. That way they can make this program even better and better from next year and the year following and for years to come. To know what you want in the program, what you liked, and what you'd like to see added on as well. So check your emails for that, and that will come to your inbox here very shortly, within the next couple days, or next couple weeks actually. So before we close, we have more cash to give away. And so we have 2 giveaways for that, just like we did last night. So I have 2 sponsors to announce, and I'll do it one at a time. And these giveaways are for $1,000 each. So good stuff coming your way. So please help me welcome Chris Sheehan of CMix. Who do we have here?
Brody Staple?
Brody Staple? Come on up here, Brody. I don't know if anyone's taking a photo, but it's a good photo app. Thank you. All right, are we good? All right, thank you. Now please help me welcome Darren Van Camp with Family Insurance for the next giveaway. Here we go, last one. Who's feeling good?
Tyrell Douglas, Highway Dairy Farms, LLC.
Is he here? There he is, right over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come on up stage. Oh, okay, he represents the farm. He's not an imposter. Yep, we're good. Thank you very much. Good prizes there. I want to thank the both companies for your contributions there as well. Well, I can't believe this conference is already coming to a close. It seems like it just started up, but I'm going to announce some of my closing comments. I want to thank everyone for attending this year's Dairy Strong Conference. I know there's a lot of uncertainty in agriculture right now. A new farm bill needs to be completed and completed on time. The future of trade is also uncertain, with old agreements as well as new agreements potentially in the pipeline. And of course, there is an ag labor shortage. However, we need to focus on some of the positives. Hopefully you can take things home from this conference and apply it to your operation and business model. I want to commend all of you and thank you for everything you do. You need to be recognized for the job you do day after day. I, for one, appreciate it, and so does everyone else in this room. With that, I hope you attend next year, and I'm here to announce those dates for Dairy Strong for 2019. I need a drum roll. I like your enthusiasm. Those dates for 2019 are January 23rd and January 24th, 2019. Same place, Monona Terrace. Again, those dates are January 23rd and January 24th for 2019.